Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to show you let me hit share. Um, what I want to show you here is an actual analysis that I'm doing right now. Let me just make sure that okay, we're recording. Um, this is unique because I haven't done factor analysis in 10 years for any project. But this gives me a little bit of a opportunity to show you what factor analysis would look like. Um, so what I have here is a survey of about 400 people, and I asked them questions about their concerns about climate change. And so some of the questions that I asked, this comes from work by Wesley Schultz from a long time ago, but they found that people tend to have concerns about climate change for different types of reasons. Some people are concerned about climate change because of its effect on themselves. Okay. And so this survey had a bunch of questions in it, like, I'm concerned about the effects of climate change on me, on my health, on my lifestyle, or on my future. Okay. We call these egocentric concerns. Now, there are other concerns that people could have that what's the concern on other people? So all people, on children, on my children or my country. And we tend to call these altruistic concerns. Then finally, one got cut off at the end here, but I can put it in right now. Let me just stick that one back in. Um, there are also, concerns about climate change and its effect on plants, on marine life, on animals, or on birds. And we call these biospheric concerns. And recent work has found that, for the most part, people's actions tend to be more related to their biospheric concerns. That people who care about plants and animals tend to, recycle more or, buy cars that give off fewer emissions than people who do, care about the environmental effects on themselves and those egocentric concerns. But in order to get at this, what we need to do is something called factor analysis. And so what I'm going to do is go here to factor, and I'm going to go and, um, well, we could do it this way, called something called principal component analysis, but I'm just going to do something called exploratory factor analysis. Um, what I'm going to do is, what factor analysis allows me to do is to put in a bunch of variables that and what it does is it extracts the correlation from those variables. So if I go and I put all of these in here, I'm going to go shift and I'm going to put them in. Um, what I need to do is to determine or to figure out, which of these questions sort of correlate with one another. So what we tend to do is I like to use something called the principal axis approach. And what is falling out from the data that I collected, which is different than the data that people collected before, is that it seems like the best solution for this data set is a two-factor solution, where on one factor, all of these concerns me, my health, my lifestyle, my future, all people, children, or my country. Um, all of these fall on a single factor, whereas these biospheric concerns fall on a different factor. What this means is that people's responses for these questions here don't correlate all that well with their responses up here. Now, what I can do is to force a three-factor solution because that's what, prior research showed, and that's what I'm going to do here. Um, what I'm going to do is to say that I want to see a solution with three factors. Okay, so um, and it doesn't want to do it because the data that I collected doesn't seem to show that there are these three factors. It shows that there are two. One way of looking at that is called a scree plot. And a scree plot is a plot of the eigenvectors of the matrix that created this analysis. That word I used in the last video, eigenvectors or eigenvalues. And this is called a scree plot. Normally, the way in which a scree plot will work is that it will plot the factors in terms of the most weight that they have, the strength that they have. And we call this a scree plot. What scree is when you have a mountain and rocks fall off the mountain. Like this is the wall of the mountain, and there's just these piles of rocks down there. What a scree plot allows you to do is sort of, if there are factors, the factors should be on the side of the mountain, like over here. So if there was really a good three factor solution to this, there would have been, one factor up here, one here, and one down there. And then when you look at all these other ones, adding any of these additional factors won't add anything to the analysis. So what we generally do is to say that, the mountain part is the important part, and then once we get to the scree, it no longer is adding anything to the analysis. Um, and that's useful because what this is saying is that, maybe the way in which people thought about the environment today in, 2025 almost, um, maybe we've changed as people. Maybe we really do lump together thinking about me, my health, my lifestyle, my future, with things like all people, children, and my country. Um, I actually, think that if I were to design this survey, and this was one that was done by, again, Wesley Schultz, I would have chosen different phrases for this second factor. I would have said instead of my children, I would have said future generations. Or my country, I would have said something like the earth in general. Um, but sometimes you are stuck using what other people do. And so that's one of the limitations of using surveys that are established as opposed to creating your own. If I were to have created my own survey, I would have done something very much like this, and I would have changed maybe some of these to instead of all people, humanity, children, future generations, my children, which seems very much correlated with these factors up there. I would have said, my future generations, um, and again, my country, I would have changed it to all countries or something like that. Um, I've criticized this scale. I've used this scale in literature that I've written 15 years ago, and I criticized it back then for the same reason. So I'm sort of finding the same thing that, today that Schultz did back in when he did this study originally in 2001. Now, another thing to remember is that context matters in any kind of study. I did the study only on residents in New Jersey. He did the study on people that live in California. It's very possible that people who live in California think about the environment very differently than people who live here in New Jersey. It may be that people that are in New Jersey think very in an egocentric way about environmental effects on themselves, and so therefore it loads heavily onto this single factor. But it's very telling that this factor and this factor are not loading onto each other really at all. They're forming separate dimensions. So people really do think about the effect differently on plants, marine life, animals, and birds than they do on these sort of more egocentric, or we could even call these human-centric concerns. That's how I would, or when I have to write this paper up, because this is real data that I collected. I'm really doing this live today, analyzing this data. And what I would say is that instead of a three-factor solution, there's maybe a two-factor solution. And I could call the first factor, human impacts of climate change. And then the other factor called biospheric impacts of climate change. Um, but it really doesn't like a three-factor solution because it doesn't, none of them fall out. Now, the important thing to remember is that factor analysis is really complex. There are these things called rotations that will influence the number of factors. That one it doesn't even want to do. Quartermax, what it comes out, Quartermax allows you to have factors that overlap on each other, like they are doing here. Um, there's one called Promax. And the Promax solution is actually coming up with a three-factor solution. It is saying clearly, factor one, these are the strongest kind of correlated. This is the second, and this is the third, whereas this question is sort of, loading both on the egocentric factor and this altruistic factor, with these biospheric factors being down here. Um, Now, you would really have to read books about how to do this right. And in fact, there is a great book that was written, 20 years ago, called Factor Analysis Use in Health Sciences. I can find and upload the author's name and everything, but it was an excellent book to read about this. And it's kind of important to understand, that factor analysis is used in survey research, where when you're asking people lots of questions, which many of you are planning to do in your research, to understand this sort of relationship between the different questions that you ask people. So, um, I don't think that factor analysis is a topic that, fits into a general graduate level course in statistics. But I think that it's useful for you all to know that it's a method that exists. If you're the kind of person that does a lot of survey research or is interested in survey research, you're going to see factor analysis pop up all the time. And if you're planning on doing a career where you're going to be doing surveys of people, whether that be the use of personality surveys, because look, in an earlier exercise, we analyzed the big five traits. Where do you think the big five come from? The big five come from the idea that these psychologists back in the 1990s, Costa and McRae, came up with a survey like this and containing a whole bunch of questions, not just, on all different aspects of personality. They ran it through a factor analysis and they found out the best solution that resulted from this factor analysis was a five-factor solution that included openness to new experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And for 35 years now, that's sort of stood the test of time as being a particularly good way of sort of very quickly assessing people's personality. Now, there are other solutions. Some people have proposed a seven solution model to personality. In fact, there was a guy in the 1960s that actually proposed a 64 factor model. I think that they were very enamored back then with supercomputers and, being able to do this. I don't know that you know, it you have to think about it this way. Do you really, come up with a more clear example of how human personality works by analyzing each person on 64 factors? That's too much to wrap your mind around. Um, but I think that this is evidence of the fact that, at least this factor analysis seems to work, but you just have to understand that the solution that you get really depends on this, what you see over here, the extraction method and the rotation method. And it is the one method in statistics that I see abused most often, or used incorrectly, or misunderstood. So I think that if you're going to play around with this, if you're going to design surveys, uh, this is something that you really should be checking a book out. Again, that health sciences book with factor analysis, I thought was, and it's in Rutgers Camden Library. It's, I could find the call number for you if it's something that you're interested in. But again, here I am, a psychologist, and this is maybe the third or fourth factor analysis that I've done in a career that spans 25 years, let's say. So this is not something that you use like you would use a t-test or ANOVA or regression, but it's useful for you to know that it exists, it's out there, and you can, now you can design, your own surveys or personality measures or whatever it is that you're interested in doing research on. So there is factor analysis.